Hello, my name's Peter Burrows and today I'm going to go through how to build a Daxara 239x4 trailer. This is the largest size that Erde and Daxara do, and there is one model above this which has brakes on, but it's exactly the same size and just requires brakes to be fitted. This trailer consists of a floor pan in a large box, a box full of the panels and drawbar, nuts and bolts, etc. A large box that has 4 wheels and 2 mudguards in, and 2 axles. This is all you require to build the trailer. The trailer that we're building at the moment is what's known as a 0.3 model. Currently Erde and Daxara are bringing 0.4 models out, which will be slightly different, with different styles of chains. Chains are changed to wire for the tailgate, and they don't have any nudge bars around them, but other than that they are basically the same trailer. We're going to put this together. We're going to start off by getting the bottom box and putting it on a table to make it the correct height to work on. Now I've opened all the boxes and I've put the axles up ready to go onto the floor pan. I've also got the drawbar ready and all the fittings for that. First of all, the axles. This floor pan has 7 holes down the side. On the 4-wheel trailer there is a captive nut in the 2nd hole and the 6th hole. This is designed so that the axle sits on the 2 outside holes at both sides. So the front axle sits like that and the rear axle sits like that. The 3 holes in the middle are for building a different trailer. There is a single axle version trailer, and that bolts 1 axle on these brackets. These are not required at all, making the 239. All the bolts need fitting. The bolts with the captive nuts on the inside have a plain washer and a spring washer. These just want slotting in loosely, and the ones on the outsides of the axle have a nylock nut and a plain washer. All of these are M12. Once this is done, go round the other side and make sure that they are fitted as well, and tighten them up a little bit. Now we've got the drawbar, there is a bolt that is loose that they use to fold it up like that. This needs removing. Then it is good with a ratchet and spanner just to loosen the bolt on the front to allow it to pivot. This can be a bit tricky because you can't get a socket on for the edge of the coupling, so always put the socket on the bottom and an open-ended spanner on the top. Just loosen slightly. Once that's loose, untangle all the electric cable from inside, make sure the chain's clear, and the back end requires the removal of the elastic bands so that the electrics cables can go down either side. Once this is done, that can sit upside down under the axle. You need 2 further M12 bolts with washers and nuts, and these fasten through the drawbar securing the back end in place. Again, these don't really want tightening up yet. The same now wants doing on the opposite side. Once you've opened the drawbar out, you then need 2 large angles. These are found in the box with the wheels. These go between the axles and join the 2 axles together with an M12 bolt and washer going through the holes there. Then the axle itself needs sliding back and bolting into the middle hole. This is done M12 bolts with a washer and an eye-lock nut. This is the first one in place. We're fastening the large angle to the side of the axle and mounting the drawbar to it. The next part, this needs fitting between the drawbar to this hole here and this hole here. This being a 4-wheel trailer doesn't actually tip, and rather than a tipping mechanism is bolted to 2 holes in the front of the floor pan. To get this in, it can be a little tricky as you need to roll it up into place. The front bolts are an M8 with a plain washer and a spring washer. They are the longer M8 bolts. They're M8 by 35 and they go straight into captive nuts. The 2 bolts that go into the side of the bracket here are shorter M10 bolts. Once these have been removed, most of the bolts that are left should be a shorter golden coloured M8 bolt. The side bolts slide in like this and can be a little bit awkward to line up. As I've mentioned earlier, everything is only put in finger tight. This allows it to all move. All the axles can move and the A-frame can move to line things up. We're now going to go through tightening. I'm going to start off tightening the bracket to the floor. I'm then going to work out to these, and then I'm going to go back and bolt the axle up. I'm going to tighten all 7 bolts on either side. These are only going to be tightened up loosely, and this will be in preparation for them to be torqued up later. Once the A-frame is fitted to the axles and the axles are fitted in place, we've still got the bolt missing that had to be removed from that, and the jockey wheel needs fitting. I've also removed the other rear bolt. This plate wants to sit over the top of the 2 holes. This mounts onto the bolts through the draw tube. Be careful, as when you've removed the bolts out of the chassis, there are some tubes that stop it crushing. Make sure that they are in place properly. Slide the bolt up, drop the nut on. And refit the other one, making sure that you don't lose the tube again. Then there is a bracket that's with the jockey wheel. This slots over the back of this bracket for the coupling. There's holes that line up with all three of these, and there's a small bag of bolts that's in the same part of the box just for the jockey wheel. This contains the nuts, bolts, nuts, set screws and washers to mount it in place. It's fairly simple to do. If you buy this jockey wheel separately, you have to bolt the bracket to the you have to bolt the U-shaped bracket onto the jockey wheel clamp, whereas when it comes with this trailer it's already bolted up, so there's a lot less bolts to fit in it. Now the jockey wheel needs fitting. As this plate that's on the bottom of the A-frame is a solid loop, when you can't just drop the jockey wheel through, so you need to wind it until it drops in two. This takes some time, but you need to just keep winding it as if you're jacking it up, and eventually the jockey wheel itself will drop in two. Once that's dropped in two, put it into the clamp, make sure it's stuck through the bottom plate, and tighten that up. Tighten the clamp up. You can then drop the centre of the jockey wheel on and wind it in, ready to use. Now the jockey wheel's in place. I've not fitted the wheels yet. I've not fitted the wiring. The wiring, there's 4 small clips. These small clips are spring loaded. You squeeze them together and feed them through some holes on the underside of the trailer. There's one that mounts just behind the rear axle in the cross member, and there's one that goes in the cross member behind on both sides, so there should be 4 of these brackets inside. Then the cable can be clipped into place that stops it from hanging down. You just do that by pushing the cable down sideways. Now this is all fitted up, we need to go around and tighten all the bolts up. I do this before the wheels are on because the wheels obscure getting into here. The 2 smaller bolts that are on the bracket that fastens to the A-frame, they are M8 and they need to be 18 Newton meters. The 2 in the sides of the A-frame and all the bits on the jockey wheel mount are M10 17mm head, and these are 36 Newton meters. The bolts that hold the axles down and the A-frame to the axles and the angle brackets that join the axles are all M12 with a 19mm head, and these are 60 Newton meters. I'm going to go through now and tighten them all up. Once we've gone around the trailer and torqued all the nuts and bolts up, now that it's all square, it needs to be turned the right way up. Before we turn it the right way up, we need to fit the wheels. These won't be tightened up fully, as they need torquing up to 120 Newton meters, and when they're rolling on a hub in the air, you can't get that sort of torque. You need them to be mounted on the floor, and preferably the trailer held still. As with most trailer wheels, fitting them with stud bolts like this, where the bolts go in, isn't the easiest, because trailer wheels don't centre on the cap so they can move round. They rely on the bolts to keep them tight, to keep them in place. Now that's on, I'll get the other 3 in place and we'll start to turn it over. This trailer being large, we try and use 4 people to turn it over to be safe. Now the trailer's the correct way up, the light bar needs fitting. It can be fitted while it's upside down, however as we turn it over we find that it falls out because there's no securing screws holding it. On the back you've got yellow and green stickers to tie up with the plugs that are dangling down. These plugs will slot in. They have a little cutout in the edge of the plug and a little pin. They need lining up, securely pushing in and twisting to lock them. Additional on this particular trailer, there are 2 small wires that come out of the wiring loom, and there's 2 wires underneath the trailer. These need joining together. They run to the front of the trailer and supply power to the front markers. The front markers are required when a trailer is over 1600 mil wide. This and a few others, such as the Erde 238, are the only ones in the Erde range that have these additional cables. Once this is fitted, the panel just slides in and is supported on a plate that's riveted underneath. It's extremely easy to knock out, so you have to be very careful doing the next process, which is fitting the sides. Now the side panel needs fitting. Due to the size of these are a bit more difficult than smaller trailers, and I tend to use 2 people to fit these. What we tend to do is we slide it sideways and into place. Once it's into place, you put the securing bolts in this side and make sure the light bar's tucked in. Once these are slightly secured like this, we need to mount the other one to put the front panel in. Once the 2 sides are fitted, you need to fit the front panel. To fit that, you need to remove the 2 linchpins that are in the front. Then it's got some brackets there, some pins. The top pin needs to go through this slotted hole here, and then the bottom comes down and goes into these latches. Once the latches are in, this will hold the whole trailer square, ready for all the other nuts and bolts to go in place, and you can go round to tighten them up. You can tighten them up better. Also, we'll need to fit the tailgate and the mud guards while before we tighten up. To fit the rear panel, first of all I'm putting the small screw in the bottom that holds the light bar onto the rear panel. This helps keep everything square. Then in the bag of bolts there's some hinges. These need to be fastened onto the back to allow the tailgate to hook on. Going to do the same on the opposite side. Once these are loosely fitted, the tailgate can be slotted on. This can be a little bit tricky to line up. Once that's on, take the elastic band off the catches, snap them in place. This should hold the whole body square before you tighten up. We're going to put a mudguard on and a front nudge bar. The front nudge bar holds the front marker light, and then we're ready to go round and tighten it up. One of the next things to do is to fit the front nudge bars. These are still on this trailer because they have the front marker light on, whereas all other trailers that had these have had them removed. These mount onto the front of the trailer, going through two holes through the front there and a hole further back here. First of all, the pin goes in like so, and this bolt mounts in there, and then the rear bolt goes in to the hole in the side. Again, I only mount these loosely. The cable goes through a rubber grommet in the edge of the trailer, and then underneath the trailer there is a small plug, the same as the one on the back, that this needs to be plugged into. Once that's connected, tuck it up into the frame. Now we need to do the mudguard. The mudguard needs mounting down the side of the trailer. This mounts on the lower hole there, 4 holes across the back, and a lower hole out of 2 on the back edge. These mudguards are handed. There is a plastic flap on the rear of it which makes it handed. Other than that, they are identical. To mount them, I put a bolt through the front top hole, run that up a little, the rear hole, this will support it all in line to allow me to then tighten all the rest up. Now it's all in place, we can go round and tighten all the bolts up. These want tightening up a little bit and then torquing up shortly after. All the bolts for the mudguards and around the front of the trailer are pretty simple and self-explanatory. When it comes to tightening these up, I find the easiest way is to get a spanner and hook it on like that and pull it tight. I've already done this, but that will tighten it quite easily. Don't forget, which I find a few people do forget, these little screws under here. Just nip those up slightly, and you need to lower the tailgate to get to the 2 screws that hold the hinge on. Once these are all tightened, you need to go round and torque it. We do find that there is a bit of a problem torquing these up, but to do that I use a crowfoot spanner that sits in there with a short extension onto a torque wrench, and it will get it to approximately the right torque setting. I'm going to go round now and torque all the bolts up. All the M8s, which are all the way down the mudguard, holding the front nudge bar on, the hinges, and this are 18 Newton meters. The two screws underneath that are 10mm head M6 are 8 Newton meters. I'm going to start off by torquing these up. That was almost up to torque. Then I'm going to swap to the socket and work all the way around the trailer. The final thing to do to finish the trailer off is to tighten all the wheels up. These are 120 Newton meters, and tighten them using the correct tightening procedure of going diagonals as you tighten them. We also will torque all the wheel nuts up as the customer is taking the trailer, as they do settle and end up just needing that tiny bit of tightening before they leave the premises. Now this is done, you've got a full 239x4 ready to go. If you need anything off the website, any spares, etc., or the trailer itself, please see the link below to visit our website.